Insider drops a bombshell about the New York Mets. Buster Olney's being Buster Olney again and made an outrageous article in which he said the Mets are, quote, desperate to make a deal, end quote, at the trade deadline. Mets fans continue to dislike Olney because he is super biased against the team, and we're going to dive into exactly why only here on Mets Digest. I'm your host today, Mike Duda. We're going to talk Buster Olney and his biases, but first we got to talk about some subscribers, and that being that 68.9% of you that watch these videos aren't one. So please do me a favor, do us a favor here at Mets Digest, and hit that free subscribe button. That way we can bring content to you about the amazing. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right in. And we are going to start with the source himself, Buster Olney of ESPN, who wrote an article for ESPN where he talked about the teams that he believed were the most desperate to make a deal at the trade deadline. Now, first and foremost, using the word desperate is very interesting in this kind of an article. I would say teams, especially when you look at the beginning of the article, which we'll dive into in just a second, I think the word committed to making a deal, committed to getting better, would be a much better word and would be way less controversial than saying desperate, because desperate just has that tone to it where it's you're desperate to do this. It just makes a team, or in this case it makes a team or a GM or an owner just seem worse. It's just negative connotation of a word that probably shouldn't be in this article from Olney. But regardless, let's begin. It would be ideal if every MLB team were so desperate to win that they would do whatever it takes. But in an industry with so many variables from team to team, roster composition, payroll commitment, market size, owner ambition, history, some organizations are willing to go further and do more than others. Now he's going to out the Mets. The New York Mets paid more in luxury taxes last season at $97 million than the Pittsburgh Pirates have dedicated to payroll this season, and Pittsburgh could attempt to reduce salary commitments even further at this year's trade deadline. Some teams are more desperate than others. As we near the July 31st trade deadline, we present the teams most desperate to make a deal. So again, he mentions desperate 3 times. Negative connotation of a word, should probably be committed to winning, committed to making a deal. But regardless, he outs the New York Mets by talking about the luxury taxes from last season. First and foremost, why are you comparing last year to this year, Buster? 2024 does not matter to 2025. Now, in addition to that, I know the Mets paid a lot in luxury taxes last year. Nearly $100 million is absurd. That's historic numbers. I get it. But why are you comparing that to the Pirates' total payroll this year? The Mets, it would make the Mets seem out better to be, right? Because the Mets are more committed to winning. Uncle Steve Cohen, our owner, wants to win, so he's going to pay whatever it takes to win. And the Pirates owner, on the other hand, is someone that is more on the cheap side and likes players that are cheaper. He doesn't like to spend as much money. So I don't understand where he was trying to go with that comparison. I felt like he was trying to out the Mets once again, but it just makes no sense because he's actually showing that the Mets are more committed to winning and that their owner actually cares about bringing a trophy back to Flushing. Now, why do I say the word again when I talk about Olney outing the Mets? Well, because he and his Sunday Night Baseball crew, Olney is the sideline reporter on the ESPN Sunday Night Baseball broadcasts. Earlier this year in June, the Mets were playing the Dodgers on Sunday Night Baseball at Citi Field, and Olney and his crew said that fans were there. It was a sold-out crowd. They said fans were there to watch the Dodgers, not the Mets, even though the Mets were red hot and were arguably the best team in baseball, and in about 2 weeks after that would statistically be the best team in baseball. But no, Olney and his crew said that everyone was there to watch the Dodgers because everything national, any national media just always talks about the Dodgers because why not? Now, Olney outs the Mets. He begins this article by outing the Mets, talking about their luxury taxes from last year, and then you think he would rank them number 1 on most desperate to make a deal at the deadline, right? Nope. He puts them number 5, and here is what he had to say to further that number 5 ranking. He says, quote, owner Steve Cohen doesn't sport the highest payroll this year. The Dodgers' Mark Walter is wearing that distinction, but the Mets are well over the luxury tax threshold again. In the first season after signing Juan Soto, Cohen has made it clear that generally he will do whatever it takes to land the club's first championship trophy since 1986. But that does not include preventing David Stearns, the Mets' respected president of baseball operations, basically general manager, from doing what he does best, making subtle and effective deals at the trade deadline. Rival execs expect that Stearns will work along the same lines like he did last year, finding trades that improve the team's depth without pillaging its growing farm system. That could mean adding a starting pitcher capable of starting game 1, 2, or 3 of a postseason series, as well as a bullpen depth. He already did by getting Gregory Soto. Cohen is experiencing the impact of overseeing a front office that made an impetuous win-now trade at the 2021 deadline when the Mets swapped a minor leaguer named Pete Crow Armstrong for 2 months of Javier Baez. That clearly didn't pan out for them. Cohen is desperate to win, but within the prescribed guardrails. Now again, he outs the Mets by talking about Javier Baez and that crazy deal, and honestly, I don't blame him because that deal was absolutely ridiculous. But where I do blame Buster Olney and where I do say he's biased and he's outing the Mets is he says they're desperate to make a trade. Now I get it, the team needs to improve in certain areas, but look at this lineup. This was the lineup that the Mets trotted out last night. Brandon Nimmo out in left field. Brandon Nimmo is a very, very good MLB player. He's an above-average MLB player. Superstar in Francisco Lindor. Top 3 player in baseball in Juan Soto. Superstar in Pete Alonso. He had Jeff McNeil off the DH. Jeff McNeil has been playing a lot of center field lately, who is a wonderful bat. And hey, he won a batting title back in 2022. Brett Beatty, who has been red hot of late. Francisco Alvarez, who has really learned how to hit since getting demoted to AAA. Ronnie Mauricio was a great future, and he had Tyrone Taylor in the 9. But Starling Marte is someone who can DH a lot, who is hitting a 275 batting average. He's got a 118 OPS plus. He's another above average MLB player. So where are the Mets desperate? Look at their rotation. This does include injured pitchers. Clay Holmes, David Peterson, Kodai Senga, Sean Manaea, Frankie Montas. What do you mean desperate to make a deal? This is a World Series contending roster to begin with, or at least a deep playoff roster to begin with. And David Stearns is just going to be smart, and he is going to further this roster to make sure that the Mets do get to the World Series, and hopefully that they do. And Buster, what do you mean desperate? They are half the game up in the very, very competitive National League East over the Philadelphia Phillies. What do you mean we're desperate to make a deal? This makes no sense. I get it. Maybe you think he's desperate to make a deal, that being Stearns, in the sense of the bullpen. I like this. This is not the active bullpen, but because obviously it has a question mark under the other setup man. But you got Jose Butto, who's a solid option. Huascar Brasman, who's been pitching pretty well lately. I personally don't love Ryan Stanek and Reed Garrett, but you're not going to have a perfect 26-man roster. Brooks Raley and Gregory Soto are both great lefties, and Edwin Diaz is arguably the best closer in the National League. So yeah, Stearns does need to go out and get another piece in the bullpen or two, maybe go out and get a center fielder, but overall, I think Olney is just continuing to make these ridiculous remarks, these unprecedented remarks where he's saying the Mets are desperate to make a deal. This is a roster overall. Look at this roster. This roster is very, very good. This roster can make a deep playoff run, but I guess Olney doesn't think so because he outs the Mets once again, showing his biases against New York. And I say New York because it's not just the Mets. In fact, he put the Yankees at number 1 on this list. So Buster Olney continues to out New York. He continues to out the New York Mets. Let me know your thoughts down below. Are you someone that doesn't like Buster Olney? Do you think he's biased against the Mets? I certainly believe that he is biased, but unfortunately, that's all the time I have for you in today's video. Thank you so much as always for watching, and let's go Mets.